Welcome to the show. I'm Jason Whitlock, and I'll tell you why Richard Sherman won't be the player he used to be, and why Eli Manning has had a better career than Big Ben. Speak for Yourself starts now. Ow! Thursday, day before Friday, 2 days before Saturday. Can't wait. All right, hello and welcome. Cowherd is off today, so I'm joined by the NFL Network's Bucky Brooks and the founder of The Big Lead, Jason McIntyre. Let's start in college football, where Ohio State announced that it is suspending Coach Urban Meyer and Athletic Director Gene Smith over their involvement in mishandling allegations of domestic violence against former assistant coach Zach Smith. Meyer will miss 3 games and address the suspension and his behavior in a press conference yesterday.
I'm fully aware that I'm ultimately responsible for the situation that has harmed the university as a whole and our Department of Athletics and our football program. I want to apologize to Buckeye Nation. I followed my heart, not my head. I fell short in pursuing full information because at each juncture, I gave Zach Smith the benefit of the doubt. I did a poor job at Media Day. It's a big reason why we're here today. I was not being as complete and as accurate as I should have been at Media Day and afterward, but there is no intent to mislead. My role is to set a good example. In this instant, I did not live up to the university's standards. The suspensions are tough, but I fully accept them. I wish I could go back and make the different decisions, but I can't.
What about Shelley's text messages? Why were you not concerned from her messages about this situation?
I was not aware of Shelley's text messages at the time.
What message do you have for Courtney Smith?
Well, I have a message for everyone involved in this. I'm sorry that we're in this situation. And I'm just sorry we're in this situation.
All right, we're going to get into the tone that Urban Meyer, Gene Smith took yesterday at the press conference in a second, but I just want to first start with the 3-game suspension. I've been following people's reaction over social media and across the internet. I think the 3-game suspension is significant. I think that it's a real deterrent and real punishment. I think the suspension without pay for both of these guys, Gene Smith and Urban Meyer, are real and significant. I think Ohio State punished these guys. I don't think Ohio State punished them with a full belief that these guys were totally wrong. And so I don't have a problem with the 3-game suspension. I think it was harsh. I think it was firm. I think the people that are criticizing and saying Urban Meyer should be fired maybe have gone a bit too far. But first of all, I want you guys' reaction to the 3-game suspension.
I kind of expected somewhere in the lines of a 4-game suspension, worst case a year. At no instance did I think that he would be fired. He's too valuable to the program. They've done too much stuff in terms of winning and making their place at the top of the college football landscape. I just know that Ohio State relishes the fact that they're a dominant team in the Big Ten. They don't want to lose the leader of their program. So giving him a suspension would serve, I guess, some of those people well, but it will allow them to retain the leader of their program, which is what they wanted to do.
I don't know. I see 3 games, and it feels like a slap on the wrist. You know, it feels like, hey, this is a situation where Urban Meyer, when presented with the information, the first thing he went to do was, oh, how do I delete old text messages on my phone? You know, and the next thing he does is Urban Meyer's out here, I have a memory loss. I can't really remember everything. To me, that's a guy who's guilty of something. He's looking to get out of this. So I would have gone all or nothing. I would have gone, let's just get rid of Urban Meyer. Let's put a stand on it and say, you know what? We're an institution of higher learning. We care about trust and integrity. That stuff matters to us. And sorry, Urban, you're gone. Or I would have said, hey, you know what? We're not going to suspend you at all. We don't think you did anything wrong, which is kind of what they're saying, right?
No, yes and no.
Okay.
Again, the 3-game suspension provides some cover for Urban Meyer. If they don't suspend him at all hell breaks loose across the media in Ohio, and the witch hunt amps up even more. And so I expected Gene Smith to be offered up. That was my narrative from the word go, is that they were going to blame it on Gene Smith and Urban Meyer would survive. And so, again, that's why I go back. The 3-game suspension, I think, is significant. I don't think it's a slap on the wrist. Urban Meyer does not remotely look like a person who's been slapped on the wrist. Urban Meyer, whether rightly or wrongly, feels like he's a victim here. The way he carried himself in that press conference screamed that I'm a victim. And so I get we'll go here a little bit earlier than I anticipated, but I just think that Urban Meyer, Ohio State, Gene Smith, the president, the board of trustees, their actions all scream to me is we have information that makes us believe that Urban Meyer's not the real bad guy here. But we don't trust the media enough to put that information out there. And I don't blame them for that. And I know I'll be vilified and ridiculed for saying that, but having been a part of the media since 1990, having been covered by the media over the last 2 decades, the media is not interested in the truth. The media is not interested in context. The media is interested in hanging people. And so I can just talk about the stuff that has gone on in my life, and I don't want this to seem like it's a personal thing because I've seen it happen with too many people across the board. Context and the full story is irrelevant. It's just who can we hang? And I think what we've seen from Ohio State this time, what we saw from Michigan State last basketball season when the media was out for Tom Izzo and Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State and Ohio State just said, you know what, we're going to wait the witch hunt and the mob mentality out, and we think we can survive this. And I think you're going to see more institutions and more leaders take that approach. Rather than give in to the social media lynch mob, they're going to say, you know what, we'll wait it out.
And I think that is something that's very, very valid because when you look at this situation, if you dump Urban Meyer, then what? Does it go away? It just goes to the next. The mob goes to the next story. I think in Ohio State's case, they had to do something to punish Urban Meyer, let everyone know that the allegations and all the stuff that took place was very, very serious. But they also have to keep their house in order and make sure that, look, football is big business. They're in the business of winning games, and they want to put themselves in the best situation to win. So even worst case, if they suspended him for a year, you cannot let one of the best football coaches in college football walk away. They're not going to let him walk out the door. I think Ohio State kind of served 2 masters with this. They made sure that the house is in order, but they also let everyone know they're sending a message to Urban Meyer. He has to act the right way.
A couple things. You mentioned Gene Smith, right? This guy survived the Jim Tressel scandal, and now he's going to survive the Urban Meyer. I mean, he's bulletproof. Nobody can touch Gene Smith. But I want to go back to the word trust. And I got to ask you guys, Urban Meyer comes in, Bucky, you got young kids. Urban Meyer comes into your living room selling, we need you on the Ohio State, football team. We love you. Do you trust Urban Meyer, given this is a guy who in 2009, when his position coach allegedly had an incident with his wife, the cops were called, no arrest. Urban Meyer knew about that, okay? He didn't tell Ohio State when he brought this guy in. He didn't tell them about that. And then in 2015, the position coach, again, an incident with the wife. No charges or anything, but Urban knew about that. He buried that here. Do you trust him going into your locker room? Can you trust him to mold your 17, 18-year-old into a young man?
I think here's the debate. I don't look at football coaches as quote-unquote father figures. I think as much as we would like that to happen, I don't believe that is where we are right now. Maybe back in the day, that's the approach. But right now, it's a football factory. It's about them winning games. I don't think they're all the way in it to develop young people. So when it came to...
I'm going to disagree. Urban Meyer would be very upset if someone were saying he's not interested in molding men. Now, he is most interested in winning football games. But I don't think Urban Meyer reacted in any of these moments any different than most fathers would. And maybe that's the failure of men. But Jason, when you talk about an incident where you said police were called, no charges were met. And so the police come in and investigate and say, no charge, perhaps the police...
Something happened, we don't know. Yeah.
Something happened, we don't know. Are you telling me that happened in 2009? No charges. That's an incident between Zach Smith and his wife, Courtney Smith, that years later, when you're at Ohio State, when you hire him, no charges. It makes, to some degree, sense that he didn't tell them. And again, I understand the environment we're in, but husbands and wives have incidents. And not all of them can be mediated by the boss.
Totally true, yeah.
And so, again, when I watch, and we were talking about yesterday, and the tone they took, and this, Urban clearly has no sympathy for Courtney Smith. That's the only thing we can say. And so we can believe that he's just a monster of a man with no heart. Or there's the other possibility, he believes something else that we don't believe. He believes that perhaps Zach Smith is somewhat of a victim here. And he may be wrong in that belief, but that's what he believes. And I'm not sure there are thousands of other men or other football coaches or whatever that would handle all these situations of the limited information we know differently than Urban Meyer.
That's great points. I will say that the police were called many times to that house. There were a lot of incidents, and again, no charges filed. And she never went the distance. But if you guys do the history, like that kind of happens in these domestic violence incidents. At some point, you got to take a stand. We don't know what happened, so I'm not.
There's no question. But
right.
and again, I'm speculating on Urban Meyer's beliefs and thoughts. But I'll just say this: more than Ohio State, I'm wondering about her family and how did they handle any and all of this? Because if that were my child, I don't know if I would be looking for Urban Meyer to fix a problem with my grown adult child. I would be trying to do that. And so, again, I'll just say this. I think Ohio State has taken firm, clear, harsh punishment, placed that on Urban Meyer, has put a bullseye on his back. We know if there's another incident, we know he's done. They've taken action. And reluctantly, because I think all the reporting says the board of trustees didn't really want to take action. The president stepped in here. And so the group of people that have far more information than the media, whether people want to believe that or not, far more information than even Brett McMurphy, who's heard from Courtney Smith primarily. He's heard one side of the story from one person. The group that's looked at all of it basically didn't want to do anything. The president clearly smartly stepped in here and said, we got to do something or we're all going to get destroyed.
We're taking a PR hit. The other thing, Jason, we didn't even talk about this. So Urban Meyer meets the media yesterday, right? And he's reading from a prepared statement like a robot, okay? Yeah. No empathy whatsoever. And the best part is for Ohio State, they waited for that whole thing to be done, waited for the questions, then they handed out the 23-page report that talked about the deleted text messages and the incidents, that were like, whoa, this deserves some follow-up questions. So Ohio State really, I thought they kind of protected Urban Meyer, who we both agree came off awful yesterday. I mean, this was a PR disaster.
Yeah, he did come off awful. He hasn't handled the situation right in many aspects, particularly when it came to dealing with the press. First at Big Ten Media Day, then having the follow-up press conference yesterday. He could have been forthright. He could have been more empathetic and sympathetic to the victim. But he is a coach. He is what he is. I don't think that we could expect him to kind of wax poetic on these issues based on how he acted.
Name or something. I mean, he didn't even mention her by name.
Here's what I would say, though, as a person in the media. I would rather him be real than put on a show. If that's not how he feels, the fact that he let it out, I don't feel that way. I'm glad he did it. That's a level of transparency that we can now judge him on. You can call it awful, or you could sit back and say, I don't know all that transpired here. And maybe there's something motivating, and maybe it's just arrogance that's motivating.
Or he's protecting the school from a potential lawsuit from Courtney Smith.
Potential lawsuit. I could see them not wanting to go down that road. I just think we're judging Urban Meyer on how he dealt with the media at Media Day, and I don't think we in the media ever sit back and evaluate ourselves. Are we doing things that are causing sources to have zero faith in us? Is this clickbait level of journalism we're doing, making sources and newsmakers totally afraid of us, totally afraid to divulge any information to us because we will turn it into clickbait, we will use it to destroy people rather than try to explain and understand people? Some of this is on us, and we can demonize Urban Meyer and all these other people that criticize the media, but some of it is on us. I've been in this since 1990. The level of journalism we're doing today is embarrassing, and it's destructive of people. And sometimes people make tiny mistakes, and we turn it into mistakes where they must be destroyed. That scares people and makes them lie to you, makes them not trust you. And so Urban Meyer, again, he's faced some penalties here. 3 games, he's been embarrassed, had his reputation besmirched. We in the media, we're in total denial about our role in the things that we're doing improperly. So, Urban Meyer, I hope you've learned a lesson, and I hope we have too in the media. Richard Sherman, who is set to make his 49ers debut on Saturday against the Colts. Sherman hasn't played since tearing his Achilles last November, but the 30-year-old former All-Pro said yesterday he's not worried about returning from injury. Listen, he's done.
Oh, done?
He's done. He was done last year before he tore his Achilles.
Wow.
And you know how I know? He's running his mouth. It's not about the play on the field. He started some fantasy football company or website or whatever. Richard Sherman's done being an elite player. Look, you remember when Jerry Rice, his cornrows started getting further and further back? Look at Richard Sherman. Look how old he looks right there with that hair and the hairline just moving further and further back. Richard Sherman's done.
Oh, man. I won't say he's done. This is what I will say. Richard Sherman has never been a guy that had great athleticism. He was a guy that was a high IQ player. And I think because he's a high IQ player, he can mask some of his athletic deficiencies by playing the right way. Some of the videos that went viral, Marquise Goodwin and some of the guys running past him, he is trying to figure out what he can and what he can't do. And I think he's going to play the game the right way. Will he play at a Jalen Ramsey level? No, those days are done. But he can be a high-level player for a defense that puts him in a situation to make plays.
I think that Richard Sherman, I don't say he's done, but his better years are behind him. I think
No question about
he knows how to be a leader. He knows how to win. He played on one of the
He
great.
won't be a starter by midseason, Eric.
Can I finish?
Wow.
Go ahead. I just want.
Thank you.
He won't be a starter by midseason.
I think he shows a young football team how to win. And you're right. He never was that guy that was fast. He never was a Darrelle Revis or a Deion Sanders, like shut down one side of the field. He was smart. He's like a Marcus Peters. Peters is not the fastest guy, but he knows how to get to that ball. And that's the thing that Richard Sherman brings to the 49ers.
Won't be starting by midseason.
He will start the entire, until he shows me that he can't do it, I'm rolling with him. Number one, he's 30 years old. We talking like he's 36, 37 years old.
The hairline?
That's all right.
That's 45.
That's all,
45.
that's all right. The man
Let me
is
see a birth certificate.
the man is 30 years old. See, what people don't realize, his belief in himself is going to carry him a long way. He has that unfiltered belief that he's going to win every battle he's in, and that's going to take him along. He's always played to his help. When he was in Seattle, they played single high. He would always shade outside to force the receiver inside because he had safety help. It's no different here. He's going to play to his help. He's going to be smart. He's going to recognize formations from his film study and anticipate certain routes. He's always been that way. He will start the entire year. Well, nobody, as you get to 30, 31, 32, is going to be as good as you were when you were 23, 24. But is he going to fall off a cliff? Absolutely not. No.
He can't run anymore.
No. You can say he
he
can't
never
run
was
because
fast.
you watching him take a rep against a guy that was on an Olympic team. Everybody gonna look like they can't run going against him.
The man's coming off a torn Achilles. His speed was never his strength.
And it never will be.
And I listen, man, you can talk and talk and talk and talk yourself into, every day I talk myself into blame. When I get up, I'm Denzel Washington. By the end of the day, I'm Ruben Studdard. And that's what's going to happen.
Oh, man.
That's what's going to happen to Richard Sherman. He can get up and think that he's 25 again, but as soon as he takes that helmet off and looks like, damn, what happened to my hair? He's 40, he's done.
Right to the Rams, where they beat the Raiders over the weekend. I watched that game. Their backups did, actually, with almost all of the Rams starters yet to actually play in the preseason, including Jared Goff, the quarterback, and star running back Todd Gurley. After the game, Sean McVay floated the idea of sitting Goff and Gurley for the entire preseason, but later said he was probably leaning toward playing some of his starters. All right, McIntyre, should McVay sit these guys for the whole preseason?
Yeah, I'm a risk taker. You know that in life. Okay?
Yes,
I quit
yes.
my job at a magazine to start a website, and it took off. I got lucky with it. I'm all for sitting starters and stars in the preseason. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you guys will disagree, the coaches up here and former players, but to me, it's like you try something different. McVay, he's, 32 years old? This is a guy who said in the offseason, you know what, we were good last year. I'm going to take on all these strong personalities. Marcus Peters, come on down. Talib, Sue, we're willing to take risks with these guys. Even Brandon Cooks. It's just, to me, I like guys who do things differently. I love the idea of saying to Todd Gurley and Goff, hey, man, Aaron Rodgers got hurt last year. Their season was cooked. Andrew Luck, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz. I mean, they survived the Carson Wentz injury. But you can't lose one of those two guys and expect to go back to the playoffs. I love it.
I think I've always felt that the NFLPA is the weakest of the player unions. I have never understood this. 4 preseason games. Okay, Vikings lost 6 players this weekend. Week before, San Francisco lost 5. To me, there should be a rule. We cut it down to 2 preseason games. And after my second year in the league, it's my choice to play or not. The idea that you should have a running back. What am I going to learn about Todd Gurley? By the way, the Rams have a backup running back, the Kelly kid from Tennessee, who can actually play. I don't understand, year in and year out, as a fan, a consumer, I'm doing this in preseason. College football has 19-year-old kids, 17 hours of practice, limitations, classes, and I'll watch Washington play Auburn in the first week, and they'll play good football. Notre Dame will play Michigan. I need Seth Joyner in year 9, 4 preseason games, as a grown man who, on the offseason, studies, doesn't have to worry about biology class. I don't get preseason. I don't get it. To me, there should be a game or 2, and after your second year in the league, a player says, I'm out.
Listen, the only way that you get efficient at playing the game of football is by playing the game of football. Okay, injuries are going to happen. You talked about those 6 players from Minnesota. If there isn't a 4-game preseason, then they get hurt within the first 4 games of the season. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because injuries in this game are going to happen. That's just the way it is. And in my opinion, they're more prevalent now because players don't practice hard enough. They don't work hard enough. They don't galvanize their bodies in training camp so that when they get to the regular season, they're steel. They're hardened for the game. When you're talking about your leading rusher and your quarterback, you mean to tell me that those guys are going to sit through preseason where the intensity level is a little bit down here, and all of a sudden in week 1, when the intensity level jumps up here, you're just going to throw them in?
Well, why can college guys do it? And they're kids. They don't have the NFL body.
You're talking about 2 different games. There's a reason why they're in college and these guys are playing professionally. Because when you jump from preseason to regular season, there's a 20 to 25% intensity ratchet up. And if these guys haven't been doing it, I'm telling you, a lot of teams are doing this. And I'm telling you, the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, you're going to see awful offense. The only thing that's going to help them is the helmet rule.
the big thing, that's great, but, spoken by a true warrior that had, 2-a-days, full padded practice for 3 straight weeks, with Buddy Ryan, your head coach.
Never got injured in training camp,
and
ever.
The thing is, that was always one of the toughest teams in football, probably the toughest team. But a lot of old school guys make you show it. You have, their philosophy is, and I've been around, I've never been a head coach, but I've been around as a coordinator for 13 years. You get the philosophy from the head coach and you advance the plan. Well, a lot of the great head coaches still believe in, you got to show us something. You have to show us something. I remember I thought it was crazy. One time LT sat out the whole preseason, the LaDainian Tomlinson, not LT, the great defender, but he sat out the whole time, and we were playing him opening day, and I'm like, all right, he's going to have a few jitters. Well, he did for the first half, and then he came on at the end there. But the thing is, the truth is, look, Whitworth, I get it. He's 1,000 years old, and he's going to be able to kick slide into his 60s probably. But these other guys, timing is important. Just like Seth said, just call some different plays. Call a little swing pass and a hitch out there. Get them on the field. Get them used to the game. But they got to play football. Look, the rules during the season, what, is this guy never going to have a padded practice? Like, that's a war that goes on Sundays. That is a war. It's the most violent sport there is, but it's the greatest. But it's played by gladiators. So when you take them out of the circle and then put them back in, it ain't going to be as good as when you just keep them in there and let them go, because that's what they love.
All right, welcome back, Seth Joyner. Here he is. Does some Eagles stuff. The team that won the Super Bowl one time until walk-off. That won't happen again. Joined now by Fox Sports rules analyst Dean Blandino. Let's return to the NFL, where the preseason hasn't been without its share of drama, mostly over the league's new rule outlawing leading with the head, which has already led to a rash of controversial penalties on plays that look to most people like, routine tackles. Not surprisingly, the always outspoken Richard Sherman is leading the charge against the rule, tweeting, quote, "To all these people, including those who made the rule, I want a video of you running full speed and being led by anything but your head, while also attempting to bring down a moving target. You'll soon realize it's impossible. There is no make adjustment to the way you tackle. Even in perfect form, tackle the body is led by the head. The rule's idiotic and should be dismissed immediately. When you watch rugby players tackle, they are still leading by their head. We'll be flag football soon." All right, Dean, you trust the NFL to fix the issue.
I do trust the NFL to fix the issue. I just think it's going to take a little bit longer than everybody's going to be comfortable with, just because of the way the rule was implemented. Normally a rule like this, you vet it out, you look at tape, you meet with the Players Association at the Combine. None of that happened. The league meeting, they had a privileged session with head coaches and ownership. They presented health and safety data. And the next day, they're voting on this rule. And I think now we're playing catch-up.
Yeah, here's my takeaway, where I think it's unfair to offensive players, or defensive players, is that, let's say it's 3rd and 2. You're in the flat. I toss it out to a running back who weighs 240. He's got an 8-yard head start, and he puts his head down. An arm tackle, he gets the first down. This sport is about me as an offensive guy picking up first downs, and you as a defense getting me off the field. In these short yardage situations, where an offensive player runs toward me, arm tackles get nothing accomplished. So I think it's completely unfair. I think defensive players now feel like we don't get paid the most, we don't get the endorsements, we don't get the love, and now forget the over the secondary stuff. Where does a line, look at these, what is a corner and a linebacker supposed to do there?
Can I be optimistic here, be a ray of sunshine? I think they're just calling it tight in the preseason to let people know, hey, we're going to call it. But come the regular season, they're not going to be calling this stuff. They just can't. You know how the game would be slowed down by minutes significantly? And in the era of distracted fans, when we've got cell phones and they got video games, you can't slow a game down with 15 penalties on the defense. It's just not going to work.
There's no question. I mean, that's what they're doing. Yeah. And that's no different than any other emphasis foul, where the officials are directed, when in question, throw the flag. We'll put together some tape, and we'll get it right by the start of the regular season.
But that sounds good. But when it's come to the anthem, the catch rule, domestic violence, they've not been quick. I love the NFL. They don't solve their problems.
Progress is glacial at times.
They are slow to change their mind.
I do not trust that the NFL will fix this. I understand and respect why they're trying to do this, but the game of football is played and meant to be played a certain way, and you can't deviate that far away from it. My biggest problem with this is the rule says it's a foul if a player lowers his head. It doesn't say a defensive player or offensive player or a special teams player. But I would challenge everybody up here to go and look through the first 2 preseason games, 32 games, and show me a tape where one offensive player has been called for this foul.
Yeah.
They've all been called on the defensive side of the ball. And what it's leading to is that, we're evolving into this pity-pat, lay on each other type of game on the defensive side of the ball, where the offense is allowed to, knowing where they're going, knowing what the snap count is, to play the game at a fast pace. And as a defensive player, I've got to be cognizant of everything. Listen, football's a game of leverage. And coaches have always told us the low man always wins. So if a running back is barreling at me 100%, and I got to come up and I got to make a tackle, and he starts to lower his center of gravity, that means I've got to lower mine to match. Okay? If I don't, then he's going to run me over and keep running. I'm going to be the butt of the jokes Monday morning in the film session, and he's going to score, and the coach is going to be looking at me like, what the heck was that? The way the game is played, It's impossible. Richard Sherman is correct. It's impossible. Now, I get it. If a guy comes up and he launches himself and tries to strike with the crown of the helmet, absolutely. I believe that we're one generation of football players away from getting this right, because I've always taught my young kids, strike with the face mask.
Right.
Back in the day, you used to see, linebackers and safeties with these big necks, because they would strike with the face mask, and that required that they engage those neck muscles in order, and it accomplishes two things. You see what you're hitting,
Right.
and you take away concussions, neck injuries, and all those types of things. But they want you to completely take your head out of football. That doesn't work, because if a guy's got momentum, the getting across the bow, getting across the guy to stop his momentum, that's how you do that. And there's no other way around that.
What's happening in the NBA, and we've seen it happen gradually, it's become really an offensive league. You can almost take 3 steps now. It's incredibly, you can't hand check. You can't, and so the NBA, I think the NFL looks at that and goes, well, the NBA's never been hotter. And they've modified all their rules offensively. Michael Jordan used to just steer you around the court, and he was the most popular player. Part of me thinks the NFL is watching millennials watch basketball, and they're like, what's the value of quarterbacks getting hurt, running backs getting hurt, 9 to 6 games? And I think most people have copied the NFL for years because they do it right. I think the NFL is watching the NBA and saying, there's no value in injured stars.
How much more of an advantage can you give the offensive side of the ball? There was a time where you could beat the wide receiver, the tight end, the running back up at the line of scrimmage and take him completely out of the route. Now you can only chuck him or jam him within a 5-yard, radius, within 5 yards one time, and then you got to let him go, and then you got to cover him. Listen, if you're in the NFL, the highest order of football, and you can't get off a jam, then you should go to McDonald's and flip burgers. That's just the way it is. That's the way it should be. But you give the advantage to the offensive side of the ball when you can't take a guy out of the route, and then what you have is in these games, you got defenders are afraid to get up and challenge people. They're playing off, even in man. Even when they get up and bump, they turn, they open the gate, and they let the guy run by him. And you're basically playing 7-on-7. And offenses are moving up and down the field. Quarterbacks are throwing for 4,000 or 5,000 yards a season. How much more of an advantage do they need?
and this isn't new, by the way. I think the NFL, I've been in these rules meetings, and they always look at points scored, they look at number of plays, and many of these rules are slanted towards the offense. That's what puts people in the seats.
And those numbers are way up,
And those
aren't
numbers are up. But if you look at last year, I think one of the alarming stats from last year, passing yards were down per game.
Yeah, but is Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun?
It's possible. It's possible. I think it's also that stuff downfield, illegal contact defensive holding, wasn't called as tightly. But I think Seth made a great point. We are a generation away. This is a culture change.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I first started at the NFL, I was an intern cutting video. And in 1994, and you played with this guy, I put together a Chuck Cecil highlight reel.
Yeah.
And he was just crushing people. And if you put that tape on today, I don't think there's anybody, any fan, anybody associated with the game would think that that's okay. And it was acceptable at that point.
Oh, it was not only accepted, it was glorified.
Exactly, it was glorified. And then in 1995, they said, we've got to fix this. We've got to put in rules protecting defenseless players. I think that's what we're seeing. And this is a broad change. But I think we're just trying to see this culture change. And like you said, I think we're a generation away.
I wish we had more time, because you want to know something? That whole theory about a defenseless player, my question is, who makes him defenseless? When you have quarterbacks that don't read coverages correctly and they're late with the ball, the onus goes on the quarterback because he didn't throw the ball on time. So now he put his receiver in a position of being defenseless. That onus shouldn't fall squarely on the defensive player. The defensive player is just doing his job. He's trying to shift momentum. Big hits back in my day, they shifted the momentum in the game. It seems to me that the NFL is trying to take all big hits out of the game unless it's an offensive player putting it on a defensive player.
All right, welcome back. Seth Joyner, TJ Houshmandzadeh, and Rob Ryan are back. Let's return to the NFL, where the league's new rule outlawing leading with the helmet has caused a lot of problems so far this preseason, with a mountain of flags piling up over what appears to be routine tackles. Now people in the game are starting to push back, with Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer saying the new rule could have major consequences off the field.
Yeah, it's going to cost some people some jobs. Playoffs, jobs, the whole bit, I'm guessing. But, we're going to keep trying to – we haven't had any called on us so far. But it's just hard to figure out. No one's ever said to me, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're going to call less or we're going to straighten it out in the regular season, or we're going to come up with a revised rule." No one's ever said that.
I completely agree with Mike Zimmer here. I think his point is outcomes of games are going to be turned on this penalty, and people are going to lose their mind. And then when they get to the end of the season, some coach is going to be jobless and get fired because this new rule will have played some important role in some playoff game and some regular season game that will be held against him, and he will be fired over it. I think that's Mike Zimmer's point. I don't like this rule. I'm toxically masculine, and I'm not ashamed of it. Everything about me is toxic. So I love the NFL and wish we could hit again.
I agree with Mike Zimmer's point 100%. And this is the scenario that I paint. If there is a coach who is on the hot seat and he gets to week 17, and this game, with 30 seconds left in the game, is the difference between him keeping his job and losing it, because if he wins this job, his team goes to the playoffs. He loses this team, his team missed the playoffs for the 4th straight year in a row. You get one of these calls, his teams lose the game, he loses his job. This is exactly what Mike Zimmer is talking about. And it's absolutely insane to think that you can ask football players to play the game of football without the head being involved in any way. And like I said before, I get the crown, striking with the crown, okay? But there's no way that you can prevent inadvertent contact, helmet to helmet, or the helmet striking the body.
Just putting refs in terrible positions as well. Too many subjective calls.
I said it a few weeks ago on this show. It is virtually impossible to make a tackle and take your head out. It's virtually impossible. When you drop your shoulders, your head is going to go because your head is on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. It's an egregious hit, something that's just like, oh my God, that should be a penalty. These penalties are calling now. Number one, they will change it. They're going to change the whole concept in a way. They're going to change it. We're talking about it so much. You got coaches talking about it. You have players talking about it. They're going to change the rule. They just want to bring some attention to it, some awareness for the players, stop leading with. It's impossible to make a tackle without your head at some point coming in contact with the player.
I'm not 100% sure. And again, I love the in bump we played coming into this segment because I'm just telling you, my point of view, there's an attack on masculinity, and football is the head of the snake.
And offensive players, if you're in the middle of the field, you catch a ball, naturally, instinct, you're going to curl up, you're going to duck your head. The defender's coming at my waist, but when I duck down, that's helmet to helmet. They can't call that because he's moving things are happening too quick. They have to understand that.
Let me just, before you go, Rob, I'm just telling you, they want a more feminine version of football, and I just don't think, seriously, I just don't think fans are going to go for it.
Well, I mean, TJ, why duck now? Just stay upright. No one's going to hit you.
It's instinct.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
But
I mean,
what you're saying
is
that's just instinct.
I think what they really, I would understand an emphasis on spearing an opponent. I understand that. I understand, hey, we're holding a guy up. We use, bounce right L's off him. Okay, that I could see. But, so that's what, 4 plays a year? Like, we're not, this is crazy. Like, guys are sacking quarterbacks with their head on their back, getting a penalty. It's like, well, he lowered his head. What? There's only a certain area you can hit him already. I mean, don't ruin the game. This is the best game in the world. All right, and they don't need to put more stuff on it. They don't need to slow the game up. And exactly, the game's hard enough already to win. Now you're going to lose because of some penalty that should never have been called. No, I don't think so.
The question is, TJ said egregious. So what is an egregious hit?
Where we're all watching the game and we're like, oh my God.
But there are clean hits that are like that.
Right.
I've been watching some games.
A spear would be.
The crown of your helmet, the top of your helmet.
I'm not talking about the head. Now it's like if you blow somebody up and you blow them up legally, that's a penalty. And that I don't understand.
It's crazy.
You can't have that. Right. I mean, that ruins the game of football.
What ruins the game of football? A good hard hit?
No, I'm saying calling it.
Rolling.
If you call a good hard
I'm
hit.
about to come unglued.
If you look at
that's ridiculous.
USA Today said In last year Bengals-Steelers game, 26 penalties could have been called last year in the first half had this rule been enacted last. There's no way they're going to water the game down. There's no way.
Well, here's the problem, TJ, and this is where the inconsistency of these calls are going to blow people's minds.
And Zimmer's right about that. You will lose jobs.
Well, it's the inconsistency. No, there will be a bunch that won't get called, and then all of a sudden the ref will decide, oh, this is the time I want to throw the flag, and people are going to lose their minds.
So let me give you a stat. Through 33 preseason games, there have been 51 of these penalties called. 43 of them have been on the defense. Now, I'm hard-pressed because I watch a lot of football, and I've been watching a lot of preseason games. I have yet to see one of these called on the offensive side.
Oh, it's happened.
So I'm trying to figure out where those 8 are. I don't see it. And it's slanted towards the defensive side of the ball, which is highly unfair because the offense knows where they're going, what the snap count is, all of that stuff.
We're in Browns games when no one's watching.
But when you were saying, maybe it's going to be called, some games they won't call it tight, some games they'll call it tighter. Look, when I was in New England, we used to do it hitting receivers. Do business as business being done. We would take it and hit that receiver 12 yards down the field. If we weren't getting it flagged, we'd go to 15, and then some guys would call it tight and you have to, change the way you're hitting. Then they put that new rule in because of us, because we won a Super Bowl. I'm just saying, that'd be terrible to do, but I could understand. If it's going to be this way, you're going to have to do it that way.
The point of Rob's story is his defense won a Super Bowl. That's why he told
That'd be 2.
All right, welcome back. Seth Joyner, TJ Houshmandzadeh, and Rob Ryan are back. Let's move to Philadelphia, where Eagles coach Doug Peterson's new book, Fearless, dropped today. Just like Peterson, the book has no shortage of swagger, including a passage where he rips the Jags for coaching scared during the AFC Championship game, writing, quote, "It made me mad because Jacksonville had New England right where they wanted them. I was screaming at the TV in my office. When they knelt right before halftime, inside I was like, I'll never do that. It fueled me." Listen, Doug Peterson's comments are 1,000% accurate. Mm-hmm. Anybody watching that game had those thoughts. I'm not sure he needed to share. I'm not sure if I want to put this out there in a book. And I look at the entire Eagles team, from Lane Johnson going after the Patriots. I just see I just see an organization that's just very full of itself. I see, again, and we're not going to have this discussion, but I just look at Malcolm Jenkins and all the things he wants to accomplish off the field. I see a team that feels like they're on top of the world and they've reinvented football and they are the end-all, be-all of football. And I just think teams like that oftentimes get humbled. I just tone it down a little bit, Philly. Win a second Super Bowl, then this will seem more justified. You all don't have to be egomaniacs like Seth Joyner. You could be a little humble.
If there's one thing that I know, whether we're talking sports or we're talking life, if you lack this thing called confidence, self-belief, you have nothing. I've seen some of the greatest athletes in the world lose that confidence, and all of a sudden they couldn't accomplish a thing. So I have no problem with their confidence. I have no problem with their cockiness. They are king of the hill right now. They're Super Bowl 52 champions. And until somebody dethrones them in February, they will be Super Bowl champions. I don't have a problem with Lane Johnson saying what he's saying. You just got to show up and you got to play. If you're going to bump your gums, you better be able to back it up. You better be able to walk the walk. And you hear a guy like Von Miller say, hey, that Lane Johnson guy, that number 65, he's the best tackle I've played against. Okay? Doug Peterson, it's a book. You got to have some controversial stuff in there to get people to want to go out and buy it. And if that's the way he feels, that's the way, we want transparency and we want people to be real in the sports world. And the minute that they are, then we take it in another direction and make it seem like, they're being cocky. But from my perspective, there's only two sides of the coin. You either uber confident or you're lacking. And if you're lacking, just like, in the wild, when the lions are chasing the meal, they don't go after the strongest one. They go after the one that's hobbled. They go after the weak one. Why? Because they know that they can get that one. And when you start acting that way, you become the one that's limping.
Me personally, I like that he did it. I don't see anything wrong. We haven't had a head coach do these type of things since the Ryan brothers was out there coaching. They kind of they say what's on their mind, and all he said was, "Oh, why'd you do that?" Everybody thought the same thing. He just put in the book. He's trying to sell books, as you said, and to sell books and to make a little money off of it, you have to put some things in there that are a little bit controversial. We're not used to seeing this. Coaches normally don't act this way. They don't say these things publicly if you're not a Ryan. All he's doing, I mean, number one, Mike Lombardi said he was the worst head coaching hire ever. So now it's like, I win a Super Bowl, am I still that bad?
Love Mike Lombardi, but, you know, he's not working in the NFL. Love Rex Ryan. He's not working in the NFL right now. Would Bill Belichick be saying these type things?
No, because I think Belichick, I know he would agree with Peterson here, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I remember when we actually won our first Super Bowl, all right, in New England, the only guy that had a book was Pepper Johnson. Another outspoken guy. But, you know, so, you know, but the thing is, look, this guy, he's bringing up the point of, look, he knows who the opponent was. It was New England. You have to outscore New England. So the philosophy going in at before half, everybody talks about that the night before as a staff, and they say, okay, hey, look, we're going to go for it. We're going to be freewheeling here. We're going to go for it, get as many points as we can, have your fourth down plays ready. If we get the ball before a 2-minute, we're going for the score. We're not going to play for the last shot, you know, which would be inching the ball to try to kick a field goal or sit on it like they did. You know, it was clearly a mistake. Look, sometimes, and I remember this happened to Rex. Rex writes a book, doesn't realize, hey, this is, you know, it's right after the AFC Championship game, whatever, gets paid, so he does it, and then doesn't realize years later it comes back, there's some things in there that he wished he never said because it comes back, and he's like, oh, you know, and actually some of the things he never actually meant, you know, but, you know, that comes back. They don't ask you to do it again.
He was misquoted in his own book.
No, he said he said some things that he was trying to inspire other people in, and it came back and blew up in his face.
All right, to Houston, where there's a ton of excitement about Deshaun Watson coming back from injury this season. But Texans fans aren't the only ones with high expectations for Watson, with one former MVP quarterback, Joe Theismann, declaring that Watson has a chance to win the MVP award this year. When I first read Theismann's comments, I was like, man, that's too much pressure on Deshaun Watson. I think that's unfair. And then I thought it through. I was like, well, hold on. Carson Wentz in his second year was headed towards the MVP until he got hurt. And no, Deshaun Watson didn't have a full complement of rookie games, but in that handful of 6 or 7 games he played, the guy was magnificent. I think no quarterback through 7 games had ever thrown 19 touchdowns like he did. And so I don't think this is crazy to think that Deshaun Watson can win the win the MVP award in his second year. He's got DeAndre Hopkins. He's got Lamar Miller in the backfield. He's got a ton of talent. It's not crazy to think he could be the MVP.
I don't think it's crazy to say that he's going to be MVP. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say he's going to be an MVP this year. You know, coming off the injury, you know, trying to get reacclimated, trying to get over the psychological hurdle of the knees, because you can be in practice and the doctors can declare that, yeah, you know, you're 100% healthy, but there's also this psychological hurdle that you have to overcome. Think about this. Deshaun Watson is 22 years old. Jim Brown in 1958 was the last 22-year-old to win the MVP, okay? In 1984, Marino won it at 23. Deshaun will be 23 in December, okay? In September, I'm sorry. But I just believe that, you know, down the road, he's going to be all that we think he's going to be and more. You know, I've always felt that way about the guy. I just think, you know, the pressure of saying that he's going to be MVP this year, that's a little bit different. Carson Wentz experienced year 1 in totality and then came back and made massive improvements in year 2. You know, Deshaun just didn't get the chance to finish the whole year, so his learning curve is still on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy's special, like Wentz, Deshaun Watson. They're cut from the same cloth. You know, they're real football people. with Deshaun, the good thing is he has overcome a knee before and came back to be even better at Clemson, and won a national championship there. So I think he's definitely in the MVP candidates eventually. Now, but will it happen next year? It may, because I think Houston, we're talking about their offensive talent, but I think their defense, with Romeo Crennel coaching again on defense, they'll be in the top 5 again. They were number 1 when Romeo was there and got fired somehow. That's crazy. But they bring him back, get a real coach on the sideline, and now they got a great chance. And
J.J. Watt healthy.
Yeah, get J.J. healthy. But they had all those other ones. Get the Merciless, get him back. I mean, this team can be legit again. And everybody knows if the team keeps winning, then this guy's got one heck of a shot to do it.
He has a great chance. And he's a quarterback. Having coming back from an ACL is not going to affect him like it would a running back or a receiver. He'll be fine from that perspective. Out of any young quarterback in the league, he would, if 5 years and under, he would be the first quarterback that I take. He'd be the first. You watch him in his preseason games. I mean, he was surgical. And all his incompletions, they were drops. They were all drops.
Yeah.
The guy can flat out play. I loved him in college. I thought he should have been a first pick. Cleveland Browns messed up by not drafting him number 1.
Done it again this year.
That's the truth. He is the type of kid that's going to play 12, 15 years. He'll be an MVP candidate every year. This year, the defense is going to be very tough, as you said. They're going to have a chance to win 12, 13 games. MVPs always come from the better teams in the league. Right. He has one of the top receivers in the league in DeAndre Hopkins. He's an MVP candidate every single year he's healthy.
That division is also getting stronger as well. And then the other thing you always have to take into consideration, you got Aaron Rodgers coming back. When you talk about MVPs, it's probably going to be a quarterback. You got Aaron Rodgers coming back 100%. You got Drew Brees. You've got
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady's right there.
Defending champion.
Listen, I mean, you got all of these guys that's coming back. A lot of times, I know a lot of times with these awards, you use it's like the Pro Bowl. Very rarely do you get your accolades in the year in which you deserve it. It's usually a year or two after you tear it up that you actually get the look that you should.
Oh, I think for Deshaun Watson, though, if he plays at a high level, if he's anywhere in the realm of playing at the same level as the other top quarterbacks, and Houston is winning, I think Deshaun Watson will win the MVP. He's a great story. And I think a lot of the way the media leans right now, they'd love to have a black quarterback again like Cam Newton be the MVP. The only thing, I feel the same as TJ and all you guys in terms of his talent and what he showed in a short window in the NFL. It makes me think he could possibly do it this year, but that's also what makes me think I need to hold my horses. Are we putting too much? When you gave off that stat about Jim Brown being the last 22-year-old MVP, Dan Marino being the last 23-year-old MVP, that kind of Jim Brown, Dan Marino, these are all-time greats. Mm-hmm. Deshaun Watson's played 7 games. Right. I don't know if I need to start comparing him to Jim Brown and Dan Marino and some of the other guys.
You got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere.
Not his fault that he's that young.
I want a little bit more information. All right, to the helmet rule itself, which has been so overcalled this preseason that everyone from Richard Sherman to Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer have taken their complaints about it public. Now another coach, Sean McVay, has added his voice to the chorus of concern over the new rule.
The thing that is really going to be interesting that you talk to the officials and you talk to coaches around the league is how do you officiate the bang-bang type plays when a guy is trying to keep his head out of it and at the last second that target ends up changing based on just the speed at which this game is played. And then also some of those things as far as, all right, well, if you're really trying to see it in live action, sometimes it's not as exactly as you perceive it. And not being able to replay those plays unless it leads to somebody being ejected is really tough because some of these 15-yard penalties might be the difference in winning and losing games, and it's such a competitive league.
All right, part of me wants to move on from discussing the helmet rule because the NFL seems determined to go this route. And so it's one of those deals where If you can't beat them, join them. And if they're going this route, if we're just going to soften up the league and it's going to be arena football, I need to quit complaining about it and just accept it. But it's almost impossible for me to do that. And so I want to ask you guys, don't talk as former players, don't talk as a former coach, just as fans. Should everyone move on from this helmet deal and discussion and just accept this is the way the game is headed?
I will say this. Come September 6th, the first game of the season, okay, the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Atlanta Falcons, if an adjustment by the NFL has not been made by that point in time, then the media, the fans, the players, the coaches, they need to just go ahead and move on and play the game. And whatever happens, happens. You know, if you get called, you get called. If you don't, you don't. Because talking about it and complaining about it is not going to change. If the NFL doesn't make this adjustment pre-first game of the season, then, you know, it is what it is. And there's nothing that our conversation or anybody's conversation, even McVay's conversation, is going to do to change the reality that this rule could possibly be here to stay.
Yeah, and if the rule is here to stay in its current form, I think defensive coaches have to coach their guys up, and they just have to play. Because at the end of the day, they've made it very, very difficult to dislodge the ball from wide receivers. They've made it where anyone can venture across the middle without fear. I think the teams that are going to be the really good defensive teams, they're going to tell their guys, hey, take your shot. Because you have to discourage people from throwing down the middle of the field. You have to make it a physical game. And if you get some penalties early, I think it's almost like when Arkansas was really good in basketball under Nolan Richardson and they hacked you on every play. I just can't believe that they're going to call every big hit a penalty. I think you have to impose your will on the offense.
Right. I mean, you know, professional sports has always been about the most physical teams. I mean, that's just the truth. I remember we were in New England. We didn't do much. All we got, you know, all this. We never had any flashy players at the time. All we did was win a Super Bowl, but we out-physicaled every team that we played. And I think it's the same. And the bottom line is, I just don't think I'm going to give the NFL more credit. Like when they called all that pass interference in the preseason, it was the worst looking stuff. I'd turn the game off myself if I'm watching preseason because it was just disgusting. Every play was a penalty. I think they've got to change this rule. They've got to look at it. Go back to spearing. Okay, call the spearing and all that, and all that. You know, just keep the game. You know, tackle is important to do. You've got to be able to get a guy on the ground. You already don't practice it enough, so it's a losing art. But you know, let's not compound a good form tackle and call that a penalty. Then you're going to make it almost impossible to coach.
Rob, you said something that made me think that we're all dinosaurs and we're in denial. You said all professional sports have been about physicality and imposing
Most of
your
them.
will.
Hockey,
I get
basketball, all of them.
I get it. But just think about basketball. You can't hand check. You can't play the way you used to play in the 80s. You can't, the physical hard fouls. They've eliminated that from basketball. If you even go to Major League Baseball, you can't play the way Pete Rose used to play. You can't
That's
just
a great point.
Running over the catcher and all that other stuff. You can't do that anymore. And so you made the point, I think, maybe inadvertently, but it's across all sports. Things keep getting softer and softer and softer. And maybe we're all just a group of dinosaurs and just have to.
What happened is you touched on it at the end of the last segment, talking about the intimidation factor. And then Bucky just touched on it a second ago. You got to understand, for the defensive players, intimidation is a big part of the game.
Yeah.
Because if I can get in a receiver's head or a running back's head or a tight end's head and make him think twice about coming across there, catching that ball, that helps me. Because I don't know where they're going. I don't know what the route is. I don't know what the snap count is. So the advantage for me is intimidation. And the league looks like it's set on trying to eliminate that from the game of football. Now you see wide receivers running across the middle. They don't even bother to look to see where the defenders are. In my day, they'd be running across looking like this, trying to figure out where they was going to get clocked from. These guys aren't afraid to get hit. And that's not a good thing, you know, for the defensive side of the ball.
I think the one thing that can change it is we can eliminate the gentleman's agreement that we used to play with. Back in the day, we used to say, hey, we'll hit you high, but we won't hit you low.
Right.
So that would be the thing. You would respect everybody because guys were like, hey, just don't take out my knees. Well, now the intimidation factor may come from the hits, chopping guys at the knees. When we saw T.J. Ward take out a Rob Gronkowski. You don't want to see your stars eliminated, But the one thing you can do to put a little fear in a receiver's mind, chop him down low when he's going across the middle. That will change the way they venture inside the number.
All right, welcome back. Seth Joyner, Rob Ryan, and Bucky Brooks are back. Let's move to New England, which may be what still unemployed Dez Bryant is trying to do. After striking out with the Browns, Dez appears to be buttering up Bill Belichick and Tom Brady on social media, praising the coach's strategic mind as one in a million and replying to a fan that Tom Brady has always been his favorite player. Dez, nice try, but we all remember your Twitter rampage a few weeks ago. I think Dez Bryant burned himself up. I think Dez Bryant still thinks of himself as the #1 receiver. I think the Patriots have had a lot of success with rehabilitating players, but they've also had some failures. Ocho Cinco didn't work. Albert Haynesworth didn't work. You can't cure everybody, and I just don't think you can fix Dez Bryant. I don't think the Patriots, he can butter him up all he wants. If I was Bill Belichick, I'd pass on that popcorn.
If there is one organization that can make this work, it's the Patriots. Because Bill Belichick is going to sit down with Dez Bryant when he comes in, and there's going to be an understanding before there's any contract signed, okay? And I say this about older wide receivers. The Arizona Cardinals did it. As Larry Fitzgerald got older, what did they do? They moved him in the slot. I think that
Dez to Larry Fitzgerald.
Say it again?
You're comparing Dez to Larry
No, I'm
Fitzgerald.
just the analogy is that when you get older and you lose speed on the outside against elite 1 and 2 cornerbacks, is that you move him in the slot where he can. And can you imagine Dez Bryant in the slot, Bucky, with his physicality against a #3 cornerback? I mean, that would be a win all day long. Because if he's running option routes and even the physical side of it, when that guy's trying, that little 185-pound #3 cornerback is trying to tackle him, he's going to get beat down. I mean, this would be a good situation. I just don't know after Julian Edelman comes back what the remedy is.
You got to know the whole route tree.
Yeah, you got to hold on. So that's part of the reason I don't think this is a good fit. The complexity of the offense, the post-snap reads, reading coverage on the run, the adjustments. Ocho Cinco struggled picking up the offense, never grasped it. That's why it didn't work. Now, I don't know Dez's aptitude, but I would wonder, in Dallas, they never moved him around. So it leads me to believe that there's some rigidity in his game. I just don't know if he's adaptable and versatile enough to play in New England because they ask you to wear a lot of different hats when you're a wide receiver.
Yeah, the one thing is being there in New England. I know the one thing that they want core characteristics. And the #1 being, you got to love football. You have to love it, or those guys just don't work out. So Albert Haynesworth, nobody here thinks he loved football. He loved money, but he took off. Like, some guys just aren't going to work. But a guy that genuinely loves football, they'll work with, they'll find a role. Dez Bryant loves football. I swear, I've been around him. I know he loves football. All right, so it'd be crazy to think, well, he can go to New England. It'd be crazy to think he could play on the slot because he doesn't run those routes. He's never shown that he runs any option routes. But I understand he could slap the guys around and get open. But the one thing I know is New England is so well coached, they could take a big guy like this and do something with him. And I think Dez loves football enough, he would try it. Now, am I shocked that he's not in the league? Yeah, he should have taken the Baltimore job. Man, he'd be a perfect fit out there. I don't know why he didn't. Cleveland, he probably, they probably wanted to sign him, and I don't know, he moved on. But I think this. I think New England's taken players late in preseasons and have won Super Bowls with them. Brian Cox, Roman Pfeiffer, they all came in late with about a week to go in training camp, and we won a Super Bowl, and they played huge roles. Brian Cox was an amazing leader, the best I've been around, to watch him take over our defense and turn a kind of an average defense into one of the toughest units in the league, and it was because of him. Dez Bryant, I'm not saying, hey, I don't think he could grasp any of Josh McDaniels, half of his offense, but I know he can still go outside and catch a football and be a good target for
I love your point about loving the game because Dez Bryant certainly does love the game. But I think the other just core ingredient they have, particularly on offense, everything comes down to trust. Are you going to be where you're supposed to be on time and prepared? And I'm talking about during a play.
Right.
And Tom Brady relies on, he trusts his wide receivers. You're going to make the right read. I'm going to put the ball here. And that's where I think Dez Bryant is a real wild card and why he wouldn't be a fit in New England is because I just don't think Tom Brady would ever be able to trust him. And it's not because he's a disloyal guy. It's because I'm just not sure he'll know what to do. I think they played him on the outside and played him in one spot in Dallas for a reason. If you're versatile enough to do other things, you tend to do it.
No, that's not true. I mean, if a guy's a number one, he's a number one. He's either X or he's a Y. That's just the nature of the beast. If they were smart, they would have moved him around and moved him inside. Because listen, if he can't win at the line of scrimmage, what do? You put him in motion. You got a guy running with him. So now you got a two-way go. You get creative. You know, Dallas hasn't been creative in their offensive thinking for a long time. They sat back and let, a defensive end, Claiborne, destroy them last year with 6 sacks without putting a tight end over there or without moving a running back over there. So you would expect for them to make that adjustment for Dez? No. But Belichick and Josh McDaniels will make that adjustment. And if you put him in the slot, it's so simple. If the slot is lined up inside, you press him in and option out. If he's lined up outside, you press him in, you option him out. If they're in man, playing inside out, you're running away, you zone, set it down. That's simple. If I can think that in my mind, you're going to tell me that Dez Bryant can't adapt to that?
You just made the best argument for Dez Bryant in terms of blowing up Jason Garrett's handling of their offense in Dallas, and they have had some problems. You've made a good point. It's worth taking a look under the hood if I was the New England Patriots.
Hey, listen, they brought Randy Moss in. Randy was 30.
He ain't Randy Moss.
Okay, but he
Moss.
has some problems like Randy Moss.
Because Randy Moss he can rely on doing one thing.
No, I get that, but Dez is 29.
I think they bring him in after the cuts are made.
Yeah.
Because now you're not obligated to pay him a whole year's salary. If he gets in there after the cuts are made, he comes in. Hey, he looks great. You got him all year. But if he doesn't, it costs you absolutely nothing. You're getting Edelman back week 4 anyway.
All right, welcome back. Bucky Brooks is here, and we're joined now by Fox College football guru Joel Klatt and the founder of the Big Lead, Jason McIntyre. All right, let's move to college football, where Jim Harbaugh just named Ole Miss transfer Shea Patterson his starting quarterback. After a disappointing first couple of years at the helm in Ann Arbor, Harbaugh now has what many people think is the best quarterback in the Big Ten, maybe in the country. And with rival Ohio State dealing with the Urban Meyer controversy, I think the conference is Harbaugh's for the taking, and I think he needs to take it to justify the hype that people like Joel Klatt and Colin
Do you want to know why I'm laughing?
and Jason McIntyre.
You want to know why I'm
give
laughing?
him. What?
Your narrative in that eloquent lead of his underperforming first few years at Michigan. Really?
Yes.
Underperforming? You know what was underperforming? Brady Hoke's tenure at Michigan. And your defense of Brady Hoke, because of the Ball State connection, is obvious right now. Jim Harbaugh is exponentially a better coach, and Michigan is exponentially better off right now than they were under Brady Hoke.
Did I miss something?
No. I was just pointing something out from your lead.
Let me go reread the prompt again, because Joel's on a different
You
topic.
said it. You
I
said
want
it.
to tailor the topic to you.
I read it with you.
Is Jim Harbaugh better than Brady Hoke? Joel?
Well, I know, but you threw a shot in your lead. You threw a shot in your lead, underperforming in his first. What was underperforming about his first few seasons?
He's got the same.
The 10 wins?
He's got the same.
Was the 10 wins
Two
underperforming?
10-win seasons.
Two.
That's more than Brady Hoke and Rich Rod
remember
combined.
when he was a dropped punt snap and a botched spot away from playing for a national title? Oh, because I remember that. That wasn't underperforming for me.
Do you remember when, I sent a DM to Tamron Hall and thought I was this close to marrying her? Do you remember that? It didn't happen.
I'm pretty sure Michigan was closer to the playoff than you were in that DM conversation.
You do realize he's got the same conference record as Northwestern during his time back in the Big Ten.
Okay.
I don't think that was the expectation.
What division is Northwestern in?
They're in the Big Ten. They're in the Big Ten.
Are they in the West or the East, Jason?
They're in the Big Ten Conference.
They're in the West, which is exponentially a weaker division than the Big Ten East. These are all just facts. Listen, I mean, I don't know what you want me to. They're better in wins and losses. They're better in offense. They're better in defensive statistics than they were before Jim Harbaugh got there.
Oh.
And the fact remains, this is a media-driven narrative. that he is underperforming at Michigan. He is not underperforming. Michigan was drastically underperforming under Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke. They made a change, and they're much better off.
I love Joe, but I'm going to go to Jason McIntyre.
Please.
Maybe he'll answer my question.
Yeah, I can.
Can I answer the question?
Fire.
Should he win the Big Ten Conference this year with Shea Patterson and the best quarterback in the conference? Is he not due to justify the hype? Should he not win the Big Ten Conference?
I looked at the schedule, and it's one of the toughest in the country. They play 5 ranked teams that are in the top 15. They open at Notre Dame. This is a brutal schedule. Even if he has the best quarterback in the conference, it's going to be a tough road for Harbaugh. But, Jason, I'll say this. If I'm a football program or an NFL team and I need to turn things around, there's one guy I call, Jim Harbaugh. He did it at Stanford. Okay, they had never had a top 5 finish in over 60 years. What does he do in year 4? Gets him a top 5 finish. He goes to the 49ers, Jason. 8 years, no playoffs. What happens? NFC title game right out of the gate.
Wait, what? Really?
Super Bowl the next year. This guy fixes programs. This is what he does. And again, Joel already talked about
let me go back
how
to the prompt
improved
again,
they are.
I want to just start over
See,
again.
here's the thing: is you're trying to throw out. I understand, and the question was derived from you because you want to throw out some sort of metric that will prove once and for all that he's overrated. He may or may not win the Big Ten. I don't think that his job depends on it, nor does his reputation depend on it. Ohio State's incredibly talented. Michigan State's incredibly talented. They won 10 games last year, bring 19 starters back. Penn State is incredibly talented. By the way, you compared James Franklin to Jim Harbaugh. James Franklin was a 500 coach before Saquon Barkley and Joe Moorhead took over that offense, and all of a sudden the last 2 years they were world beaters and they won a Big Ten championship. Now he doesn't have either of those guys, so we'll see with James Franklin. I'm just saying, I think your narrative is completely off. I don't know if they win the conference, Bucky, but Michigan's going to be a really good football team. You know how I know that? Because Jim Harbaugh is a really good football coach.
He is a really good football coach, but they're paying him a lot of money to win championships. And when I'm looking at this 0-3 against Ohio State, 1-2 against Michigan State, 1-1 against Wisconsin, I mean, you're paying the coach who is supposed to take you over the top to win big games.
Yep.
And he hasn't won big games. And I think the bigger thing is, we all believe that he was a guy that was a quarterback whisperer based on what he did with Colin Kaepernick. He was going to take anybody that Michigan threw out and make them better, and we haven't seen that.
Even that first year with Jake Rudock, we felt like, wow, I mean, he's doing this with anybody.
So now we get an opportunity. He has a legitimate quarterback. He has Shea Patterson. Shea Patterson, to me, is a real dude. I don't know if he's the best one in the conference, but he's a legitimate playmaker, a legitimate starter. Jim Harbaugh has to get Michigan over the hump based on the amount of money he's paid and the expectations that come with that. If not, I'm disappointed as a Michigan fan.
The biggest question surrounding Michigan is not whether Jim Harbaugh can get them to the next level or not. It's whether their offensive tackles are going to protect the quarterback. That's literally the only question mark surrounding this team. It's going to be a top 5 defense in the country. Their run game should be very good with the stable of running backs that they have. They're more talented at wide receiver than they've been in quite some time. I think Khaleke Hudson could be the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, and that's even in a conference with Nick Bosa. So we'll see. If those tackles protect the quarterback, they could have a special year. If the tackles develop, I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the playoff.
Let me see if I understand what Joel thinks the conversation in Ann Arbor is. That they're not talking about Jim Harbaugh finally delivering a Big Ten title, beating Ohio State with all that controversy they're in, beating Michigan State. You think the people in Ann Arbor are talking about the offensive tackle?
Let me ask you, are they better off now than they were under Brady Hoke? That's a yes or no question. That's a yes or no question.
Joe, you know, tomorrow,
I'm just asking.
That'll be our second topic here. Brady Hoke. I'm not arguing Brady Hoke. That's over and in the past. Let it go.
Better off?
We'll see this year.
We will, because I think they've been exponentially better off.
Right now, he seems to be going the same direction Brady Hoke was.
Because all of his quarterbacks got injured and they lost a few games at the end of the season?
No one else had quarterback injuries? No one else in the world has ever played 2 quarterbacks? I've seen Urban Meyer make magic with his 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks. That's who Jim Harbaugh's supposed to be. Didn't Urban Meyer with Cardale Jones, the 3rd string guy, win a national championship?
Good for him.
Supposed to cry because Jim Harbaugh, the quarterback whisperer?
I'm not saying that you got to cry. I think that your narrative is overblown.
First,
you think he's overrated? Everything that you've said suggests
What is his
that.
reputation?
Let me explain what my narrative is. My narrative is that Jim Harbaugh was paid a lot of money to win Big Ten titles. My narrative is that Jim Harbaugh was supposed to be so much better than Brady Hoke. My mind was supposed to be blown.
America.
And I was supposed to look at results and would go, oh my, Brady Hoke never could have done this.
He couldn't.
He hasn't done anything at Michigan so far that Brady Hoke didn't do while he was there.
Stop. Come on. Now it's like I'm playing cards with my brother's kids. What are we doing? What are we doing?
What has he done that Brady Hoke didn't do while he was there?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
The 10 wins don't matter.
Brady Hoke won
playing
11
Ohio
his
State
first
for the
year.
division doesn't matter.
He hasn't won the
Okay.
big. They went 8-5 last year, Joel.
Okay. In your world, Brady Hoke, Jim Harbaugh, same. Got it.
That's not what I believe.
That's what you just said.
Brady Hoke has not had
I
the
shut my
coaching
book because
career.
facts and reason don't matter in an argument with the unreasonable.
Let's move to college football, where the preseason poll is out. And not surprisingly, Alabama's number one. This poll actually comes on the heels of a CBS poll where one anonymous coach called Nick Saban overrated. Colin, is it crazy to call Saban overrated?
It's, I mean, it has to be somebody that's worked with him, that has some animus toward him or something. First of all, he's the best recruiter in the sport. He's the best defensive mind in the sport. He's probably the best builder of programs. The only thing, Urban Meyer has been able to turn programs around in year one. It usually takes Nick a couple. He's the best coach in college football history.
5 titles in 9 years. What is overrated about that?
6 titles overall,
Yeah.
2 different programs. Yeah, he's the best. By the way, think about USC's dynasty. This is double the length, and they're ranked number 1 again this year. So it has another 5 years to it.
Unbelievable. To Atlanta, where Pat Mahomes just gave the world a glimpse of why the Chiefs shipped Alex Smith out of town, throwing a monster TD pass to Tyreek Hill that traveled 69 yards in the air, farther than any TD pass all of last season. Cowherd, you sold on Mahomes and his rocket arm.
Well, I'm sold on his coach and his weapons. Jamarcus Russell had a rocket
There you
arm.
go.
So I'm sold on, if he fails, it's on him.
Welcome back. Eric Dickerson is here for Last Call. Let's move to golf, where the details of Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson's head-to-head showdown are finally out, with the pay-per-view duel set for November 23rd with a $9 million payout to the winner. Eric, is this worth paying for?
Can I get 10,000? I'll say this much here. You have 2 iconic golfers. You got Phil Mickelson, great golfer, but the guy I think everybody wants to see make that comeback is Tiger Woods. People are going to pay for it because it's Tiger Woods for sure, and Phil Mickelson. Match
Are you going to pay for it?
Absolutely not. I don't watch golf like that. I love golf, but would I pay for it? Nada.
10 years ago, this would have been awesome. In 2018, I may not pay for it, and I love Tiger Woods. See you tomorrow.